I'm Chris Long, and today we're going to install the B&W part number GNRK1123 Turnoverball Gooseneck Hitch in this 2023 Ford 1-ton truck. We'll get started on this installation by unboxing the product and lowering the spare wheel and tire. Now we're going to mark the truck bed for the proper placement of the 4-inch hole. And Ford has provided a factory dimple in the bed right there in that center section of the bed, and you'll be able to use that dimple to center punch and drill your hole. But in this case, we have a spray-in bed liner, so you can't see the dimple. We're going to have to access that dimple from the underside of the bed, center punch it, drill our pilot hole from underneath, then we can cut the hole from the top. If you're having a hard time finding that dimple on your particular truck, you can still hook a tape measure over the rear edge of the bed and measure forward 45 3/4 of an inch, and that'll be the center of your ball placement. Be sure to account for any thickness in the spray-in bed liner when you're taking that measurement. All right, now on the top side of the bed, I'm going to take a slightly larger drill bit and enlarge that pilot hole that we drilled from the underside. Switch out to the 4-inch hole saw. All right, with the hole now in the bed, I'm going to sweep some of these filings out of the way here, and we're going to eliminate the tail filings on the edge of the hole. I like to use a deburring tool. Works pretty well to actually run that around the inside edge to pull those off. On truck models that have the diesel engine, you'll need to lower the exhaust about 1.5 inches to give you the clearance you'll need for the hitch unit later. We've supplied 2 straps in the kit. You'll see them with 2 round holes and a square hole here. This will require you to remove both the inboard and outboard bolts of the exhaust hanger here. I've already removed the inboard bolts back here, so we'll get these outside ones off. Now what you can do is take the bracket and with the square hole at the bottom, put one of those 2 bolts you took out through the top hole, push the exhaust down to expose that top clip, and thread that bolt into that hole. Just start it. Then you'll take the second bolt, and what you'll do now is you'll lower the exhaust enough that that second hole lines up with the top hole of the bracket. Start it. Now the last bolt is the 1/4-inch carriage bolt that we give you in the kit. Push down on the exhaust and insert it from the back side of the exhaust bracket and through the square hole of the bracket we provide, and start the nut here. Okay, and we'll get that same strap setup done on the inboard side of the frame, and then we can tighten down the hardware. After lowering the exhaust, now we're going to prepare for the side plate installation. And we'll focus on this area here where this bracket is here by the fuel tank, where these lines and hoses are at. We want to take these 2 electrical connectors and the associated harnesses off of that bracket. So I'm going to take a pry tool and pry those up out of their carriers, like that. Same thing with the one here in the middle. Okay, and then with those out, you're going to roll these harnesses to the outside and under that bracket. Now this outside one, you can put right back up inside that same hole. This middle one here, we'll tie that up with a zip tie later on in the installation. Now, you'll notice that with these out of the way, we have better access to this area. This particular truck has the inner side plate already supplied on the frame from Ford. Some truck models do not have this inner side plate. If it doesn't, we've supplied you inner side plates right here, and this will roll into position up over that bracket like this, and then you'll roll that down into position where you see this factory piece right here. Once the hole in the side of the side plate lines up with the hole in the frame here, then you can line that up with the outside plate. Now you're going to identify which side plate you have. The one with the B&W logo and the handle operation sticker is on the driver's side, and the one with just the B&W logo is for the passenger side. So you'll take a 5/8 diameter bolt and flat washer 2 times and install those into these slotted holes on the vertical face of these outer plates. And then we're going to install this from the outside of the truck. Now again, this truck has the inner side plates already on the frame from the factory, so it's going to make it a little easier. If you don't have those inner side plates, now's the time that you'll put those in. You just want to make sure that these lines and hoses are on the underside of the inner plate. And then you'll secure both the inner and outer plates together with that hardware using a flat washer, lock washer, and nut. And you need to snug these up finger tight. All right, now we're going to begin the process of installing the cross members. And the first step of that process is to install these threaded bushings into the cross members. And you'll note that these bushings have a little flat spot on them. They coincide with the flat spot that's right inside of this hole. Now, there is a right and a wrong side to put these in. Remember, this is the side that you want facing up. I'm going to line that flat spot up with the flat spot in the hole. And we don't want to damage these bushings or these threads, so I like to use a block of wood, and we're going to drive that in forcefully. We've got a nice flat interface there, and now we'll repeat that for the remaining 3. All right, I'm going to give you a tip on how to lay these cross members out. Now you can reference the drawing and the installation instructions to get these laid out, but what you'll find works best is with the flanges all facing out from the center out. This is the center of the truck, driver's side, passenger side. The flanges should face each other, and these gussets that you see here on the front cross members, those gussets should face the cab, as you can see here. And on the rear cross members, those gussets should face the tailgate. You'll find that they're absolutely identical on opposite corners. So these 2 cross members are identical to each other. These 2 cross members are identical to each other. But this is the correct layout in the truck. Driver's side front, driver's side rear, passenger side front, passenger side rear. All right, for the ease of illustration here, we're going to show you the installation of the driver's side rear cross member. Put the cross member up into position over the inner side plate. Now on the forward plates, you'll notice that you've got 3 holes to choose from here. You've got a slotted hole and 2 round. You'll put this into position where those threads right there line up with the slotted hole. Go ahead and take one of your black bolts with the green neoprene thread locker and thread that into that threaded bushing. Be sure that you're not cross-threading it, and thread that in tight enough that it holds itself from falling right there. Now, if your truck does not have those factory inner side plates, you'll be using the ones that we supply in the kit, and you'll only have 1 hole option there. Now we can repeat that process for the other 3 locations. All right, the next step is to put in your 1/2-inch carriage bolts, and you want to offset these cross members so that you can gain access into the inside tubes. Take the bolt and just drop it right into those pre-cut squares, then line those up. Now you're going to take one of the 2 cross member braces and install it on the front cross members. And to orient this correctly, you'll notice that there's a wide top portion and a narrow bottom portion. This flange on the top portion should face towards the cab, and these 2 bolt holes here will line up with the 2 bolts that we previously installed in the front cross members. Now, you might find this a little challenging if you're by yourself to get both of these 2 holes installed on these bolts at the same time. So for a 1-person installation, if you push this bar towards the cab and this one towards the tailgate, just focus on getting the driver's side bolt in the hole first, like so. And then I can hold that into place for now with just a nut. And now we can swing the other cross member forward and drop the bolt in. And then take your flat washer, lock washer, and nut. You kind of got to use your other finger to hold that into place. Okay, and now with this started, now we can put our flat washer, lock washer, and nut on the driver's side. Okay, now you'll leave this hardware loose for now. Now it's important to follow the next procedure very closely because we're trying to get these mating surfaces to line up so that it'll be easier for the center section to line up with the holes. So we're going to temporarily take these 5/8 by 4.5 inch bolts and bring those in through the front and just attach them with flat washers and nuts. And we're going to snug those down tight enough that we know the interface between the front of the cross member and the back of the support bracket are nice and snug with each other. Now with those bolts held snugly, we're going to use a 3/4 inch socket and a hand tool. It'd be better to do this because you're tightening those two bolts that came down through the cross members in that center brace. We're tightening those just enough that we can feel and see the lock washer begin to collapse. Now with those two 1/2 inch bolts just mildly tightened, now we're going to remove the 5/8 hardware. Before we go up with the center section, we need to install the latch pin bracket. So retrieve this bracket out of your kit, along with these two 5/16 carriage bolts and the flange lock nuts. Pull the latch pin out and towards the cab to latch that into position. Take the latch pin bracket, and it's kind of an L shape. You want the fat part of that, not the skinny side, down, but on top of the latch pin with the skinny part facing outward and towards the tailgate. Once you've got that oriented correctly, the bolts must go in from the bottom, not the top. Snug those down by hand, and what we'll do is we'll snug these with a power tool just until they make contact, and then torque those to 30 foot-pounds and release the handle. Now we go up with the center section. Just before you go up with the center section, you'll want to take one of your 5/8 by 4.5 inch bolts, ready it with a flat washer, and bring this bolt in on the driver's side front mounting point of that cross member from the front side, and bring this bolt in to where the end of the bolt is flush with that slotted hole. This way when we go up with the center section, it's ready to just push in. All right, now you're going to go up with the center section by orienting it with the latch pin on the driver's side, and we'll go up over this electrical bracket right here first. And then once you get up over the top of that, you can get it into place like so, above the exhaust here. And now what we're going to do is take a hold of that bolt from the front and press it through, just like that. Now, the exhaust should hold it for you on the right side while you put a lock washer and nut on that bolt. And you can just go ahead and cinch this down finger tight right now, don't tighten it. All right, now before we put in the second bolt, we're going to retract the latch pin mechanism so that it's out of our way. And I like to put an Allen wrench inside that void there to keep that from popping back on me. And now you'll take another 5/8 by 4.5 inch bolt, and we're going to install this in the passenger side front hole. Lift the center section up in position, and take the bolt and put it in without a flat washer under the head, from the rear towards the front. You may need to lift up on the back of the center section here to make that go on the rest of the way through. And then we'll secure that with a flat washer, lock washer, and nut on the front side. Now we're going to install the remaining cross member brace. It should be the last component in your kit at this point. And we want to orient this where the wide top portion of this and this flange here is facing the tailgate. What I like to do is offset the driver's and passenger sides of those cross members and get this up right here and get that driver's side bolt in first, and then lifting both the passenger side cross member and this bracket until this edge here goes up over that lip, and then allow that bolt to drop into place like that. Now, once those bolts are down, and you can secure these with flat washers, lock washers, and nuts. All right, now that we've got that hardware on, we're going to tighten these two nuts just until the lock washers begin to compress. All right, now you'll take your remaining two 5/8 bolts. Do not put flat washers underneath these heads and bring them in through the center section, the cross member, and the brace that we just installed. And now we'll secure those with flat washers, lock washers, and nuts. Now we're going to finish attaching the center section by taking 4 of your 1/2 inch by 1.5 inch bolts. You do not put flat washers under the heads of these, and they must come in from the inside out. The threads will face the tailgate, and on the front flange, the threads will face the cab. Put these 4 in, and then we'll finish these off with flat washers, lock washers, and nuts. The last part of our hardware installation is to take your remaining 1/2 inch hardware, put flat washers underneath those bolt heads, and we're going to put this hardware to bolt the outside plates and the cross members together. You'll notice that as we start from the front, we can bring a bolt down through the top, but on this second hole from the front, we can't get a bolt in here because of this bed stiffener. So on this particular position, you're going to have to bring the bolt up from the bottom. Now we'll secure that with a flat washer, lock washer, and nut in just a moment. Let's go ahead and get these other 2 in on the back. Okay, and now we will put that second bolt in from the front, and you'll have to hold it into place. And then we'll finish this process out by putting our flat washers, lock washers, and nuts on those remaining 3. And then you will repeat that exact same process on the passenger side, keeping in mind that that second bolt back from the cab also goes upward. Now before we begin the tightening procedure, it's important to have the center section of the turnover ball pressed firmly against the underside of the bed. Now this can be accomplished with an overhead lifting device of some kind. You just need to remember that this is an aluminum bed, and if you put too much pressure, it will begin to deform or bow the bed upwards. The B&W hitch helper is also a great option, as this keeps pressure on the bed itself and kind of prevents that from happening. That's what I'm using here. It's a good idea to make sure at this time that your center section, the socket portion that comes up through the hole that we cut in the bed earlier, is in a uniform position in there where it's the same distance and centered inside that hole. And now I'm going to crank this lifting device tight to be sure that that's firmly against the underside of the bed. It's very important to do that because as we begin this tightening procedure, we need that hitch to be as far upward as possible. All right, as we begin the tightening sequence of the installation, it's important to note that because of our split cross member design, it's very important to follow the tightening sequence that's outlined in the installation instructions so that all these components come together tightly in the right order. The first 4 bolts that we'll tighten are the 5/8 bolts that hold the center section, the cross members, and the support braces together. And right now, we're just going to tighten these down enough that the lock washers are about half flattened. Before we move on, we want to make sure that we didn't change the position of the center section. So I've already been up inside the top of the bed to make sure that we're still centered in the hole that we drilled in the bed. We are. We also want to make sure that we're square with the truck. And the way you'll do that is we've provided you some little half moon cutouts here in the sides of the center section. You can also utilize some of these other holes that we provided. And you want to feel with the bed stiffener to make sure that those line up the same on both sides. The one over the release latch here is a little difficult to get to, but you can use these other ones as well. After we've got everything centered and squared up, the next 4 bolts that we're going to tighten are the black 1/2 inch fasteners with the neoprene thread locker in there. We're going to tighten those very tight right now, but we're going to do those one at a time. Once we tighten one, we want to make sure that nothing shifted. It's still square and centered. If that's good, then we'll move on to the next one, so on and so forth, until those 4 are done. Once these fasteners are tight to the bottom of the inner plates, then you won't have to worry about the centering and the squaring aspect of the hitch anymore. The next bolts to tighten will be the 8 bolts, 4 per side, that attach the cross members to the outer side plates. The next 4 bolts that you'll tighten will be the 5/8 bolts that hold the side plates to the frame of the truck. All right, the last 4 bolts in the tightening sequence before we move on to torquing everything are these bottom 4 1/2 inch bolts that hold the center section to your support braces. All right, now that we've got everything tightened up, we're going to move on to torquing. Now the torquing sequence is slightly different than the tightening sequence that we just went through, so it's important for you to reference the installation instructions to make sure that you're following the right order. And instead of going around and showing you each individual fastener like we just did, just follow along with me here in this next sequence. Just be sure that you're torquing your 5/8 bolts to 150 foot-pounds and all of your 1/2 inch bolts to 110. All right, we're all torqued up. We've got the lifting device out of the bed. Now we're going to install the handle. This is a very easy part of the installation. You simply bring the handle in from the driver's side fender well directly underneath the bed stiffener, but over the side plates, and bring it right into this area here where you can just see it and get access to it here with your fingertips. Now before you bring it in, it's a good idea to go ahead and put your 2 carriage bolts into the square holes of that latch pin bracket that we installed earlier. Okay, now with those in place, I'm holding them with my fingers here. Bring the handle and place it on the rear side or the tailgate side of that bracket like that, and then start your flanged lock nuts. They are a lock nut, so you'll have to use a ratchet or a power tool to run these up snug. Once we snug these down, we're going to torque them to 30 foot-pounds. All right, now with our handle attached, if you took any of these wires or hoses down to give you more access, now's a good time to go ahead and put these back into position. And you'll remember we put this wiring plug back up earlier in the install, and then this one here is still loose. We're going to go ahead and put a zip tie through this bracket in the hole that it was originally attached to and tie this down to hold it out of the way. Now what we're going to do is check our clearance for this handle operation. We want to make sure that this part of the handle pin apparatus is not rubbing or touching any of these lines, hoses, or harnesses, including on the top of this big hose right here underneath the handle itself. So I'm going to go out and cycle it a few times and make sure that we have the clearance we need. And I was looking through there, and we've got all the clearance we need. All right, now we're going to drill the holes for our safety chain loops. And the best way to do this is to go ahead and take your large 11/16 drill bit and use the hole in this intersection as a guide, and keeping your drill perfectly perpendicular with the bed. Drill enough that you make a little divot with the drill bit, and then change out to a pilot bit to go through. Now you can drill the hole all the way from the bottom through the top with the 11/16, but it's going to give you a rough cut in the top. If you want it to look nice and clean on the top, it's a good idea to pilot from the bottom, and then we'll enlarge our holes to 11/16 from the top side. All right, as you can see, I've already drilled out the passenger side holes for our safety chain loop here and tested that to make sure it goes in. I'll show you how we did that over there. Instead of going straight to the 11/16 from that smaller pilot hole, it's a good idea to taper that out using a bit that's somewhere in the middle. And now we can enlarge those to our 11/16 size. Once we drill these out the rest of the way to 11/16, we'll want to verify that the safety chain loop can go in the holes. If it can't, we may have to rock the drill bit back and forth a little bit to give us that angle we need to get the safety chain loop in. All right, with our safety chain U-bolts down from the top, you'll take your springs, which have a wide side and a narrow side. You want the wide side of your spring facing up over the safety chain U-bolt. Hold the spring up away from your lock nut. Start that onto the threads, and then tighten this until it's flush with the end of that U-bolt. A little more. Right there. And you'll repeat that same process for the other three. All right, we've just lowered the truck back on the ground and we just finished reinstalling the spare wheel and tire. The last thing we have to do is prep the ball for towing. Now, I've got some lithium grease here on the side. We've included a packet in your owner's manual for your own use. I'm putting a very light coat of lithium grease on just the corners. Leave the sides of the ball dry. This is to allow any dirt or dust buildup inside the socket to be able to fall through. If you lube the sides of the ball, that will actually attract dirt and dust. So just keep it on the corners. Okay, and then once that's set, I've got my latch pin withdrawn on the driver's side of the truck. I'll drop the ball in, engage your latch pin, and you're ready to tow a trailer. When you're not towing, simply disengage the latch pin, pull the ball out, reinsert it in the inverted position, re-engage your latch pin. And as always, with B&W turnover balls, it's a hitch when you need it and a level bed when you don't.